There was once a young woman named Ayla. She was filled with dreams, bright eyes, and a heart full of hopes. Ayla lived in a small town surrounded by mountains and fields. She wanted to paint, to sing, to speak to the world, to live life on her own terms. But life, as it often does, had different plans for her. At the age of 21, she was married against her will. Her family believed marriage would secure her future. Ayla, though hesitant, accepted, hoping to find happiness in it. For a while she tried to adjust, to mold herself into a new life. But the love was missing, the freedom was gone, and her spirit felt caged. Her husband was indifferent, and the days passed like shadows. She buried her dreams, her voice, and her colors deep within. One day, during a trip on a quiet road, fate intervened. A terrible accident turned her world upside down. The car lost control, rolling down a steep hill. She lay there, crushed, broken, helpless, between life and death. When she woke up, the hospital walls were pale and cold. Doctors gathered around her, faces masked with concern. They told her she would never walk again. Her spine was shattered, her legs paralyzed. In that moment, it felt like life had ended. Tears blurred her vision, and silence screamed in her ears. What future was left for a woman in a wheelchair? Who would love her now? What dreams could she chase anymore? Ayla stayed in bed, defeated, refusing to meet her reflection. She thought of all she had lost: mobility, marriage, dreams, dignity. The world outside moved on while she lay trapped in her body. Depression crept in like a thief in the night. But then one evening, she heard a nurse humming a tune. It was a song her mother used to sing in her childhood. Something in her stirred, a memory, a flicker of warmth. She realized she was still breathing, still here, still alive. And then it came, a thought so gentle, yet so powerful. What if this happened for a reason? What if life, in its strange, painful way, was trying to show her a new path? What if this was not an end, but a beginning? Slowly, Ayla began to face her reflection. She saw a woman with scars, but also with strength. Her broken body hid an unbroken spirit. And she made a promise to herself to rise again. She started painting, holding the brush between her fingers. Each stroke was a step towards healing, each color a fragment of hope. She poured her pain onto the canvas, creating beauty from sorrow. People noticed. They felt her story in her art. Then she spoke, first to herself, then to a small gathering. Her voice trembled, but her words touched hearts. She spoke about pain, loss, resilience, and hope. She spoke of how life breaks you to build you. She became a voice for many, for those too afraid to speak. Her wheelchair was no longer a prison, but a throne. She traveled to cities, to schools, to stages, telling people, you are not your circumstances, you are your choices. Ayla told them about the darkest nights she survived, about betrayal, loneliness, fear, and how she made peace with them. She taught them that beauty isn't in a perfect body or perfect life, but in the strength to keep going when everything falls apart. She would say, everything happens for a reason, even pain, even heartbreak, even failure. It may not make sense now, but one day you'll connect the dots. One day you'll realize the pain you endured shaped your greatest strength. People wept, smiled, and felt lighter after hearing her. She gave them permission to be imperfect, to fall, to rise. She inspired countless others to find hope after loss, to paint after injury, to sing after silence, to live after tragedy. Years later, Ayla looked back at her life. If not for the accident, she'd have remained in a loveless marriage. If not for her broken body, she'd have never discovered her voice. If not for despair, she'd have never tasted true freedom. She thanked life for its strange, painful gifts. For breaking her so she could rebuild stronger. For closing doors so she could find new paths. For taking away so she could learn to create. Today, Ayla's paintings hang in galleries. Her words echo in hearts across the world. She sits on stages, her smile brighter than 1,000 suns. She radiates peace, confidence, and resilience. There was a young woman named Ayla, a soul full of colors, dreams, and quiet rebellion. She longed for the skies, for art, for freedom. But her life was a narrow hallway with closed doors. Born in a society where obedience was called virtue, she learned early to stay quiet, to lower her gaze, to carry the weight of tradition on fragile shoulders, and to trade her voice for acceptance. At 21, a marriage arranged like a transaction, she was handed over, a precious burden, to a man who never understood her hunger for life nor the wild fire in her chest. There was once a young woman named Ayla, a dreamer, a painter, a believer in beautiful things. She would often sit by her window, gazing at the skies, wishing to touch the clouds, to fly beyond the mountains. She wasn't born into wealth, nor was her life easy, but her heart was rich, filled with colors, with songs. Her father believed in tradition, her mother in silence. Ayla believed in freedom, in laughter, in light. She wanted to paint her own destiny, but life gave her a brush she didn't ask for. At 21, her dreams were traded for marriage, a man chosen by others, a life she never desired. She smiled on her wedding day, but her heart wept. Every night she'd stare at the ceiling and wonder, is this all there is for me? A life of compromise, of silenced dreams. Her husband never saw her spirit, never heard the music in her voice. She felt like a bird in a golden cage, the world outside moving on, leaving her behind. Days became shadows, months turned into numbness. The canvas of her life was empty, colorless, until one evening, a journey, a road, a storm. The car spun, the world turned upside down. Metal crushed bone, glass met flesh. Her life paused, hanging between earth and sky. When she opened her eyes, the world was different. Sterile white walls, beeping machines, faces she didn't know. And then the words that shattered her soul. You will never walk again. A spine broken, legs paralyzed, a future rewritten in a single moment. In those dark days, she mourned herself, not just her legs, but her laughter, her courage. She refused to meet her reflection, afraid of the stranger staring back. Why me? She asked 1,000 times. What did I do to deserve this? But life rarely answers in words. It speaks through silence, through time, through tears. She lay still, day after day, watching the world pass through a hospital window. Friends left, promises faded, and loneliness became her only companion. But grief cannot hold us forever. It weakens, it softens, it leaves tiny gaps for light. One evening, a nurse sang an old lullaby, a sound from her childhood, a melody of warmth. Ayla's lips curved, almost against her will. A spark flickered, weak but alive, and in that moment she realized, I'm still here, I'm still breathing. That night, she made a choice, not to walk, for that was impossible, but to rise in every other way that mattered, to rebuild herself from ruins. She asked for paints, for brushes, for canvas. Her weak hands trembled, but she painted. Not landscapes, but emotions, not faces, but feelings. Each stroke spoke what her words couldn't. Pain turned to color, fear into shapes, and the world began to see her, not as broken, but as beautiful. Slowly, Ayla started to speak, first to herself, then to a room of listeners. Her voice shook, her eyes filled with tears, but she spoke of what no one dared to. She spoke of loss, of despair, of courage, of how life breaks you, then rebuilds you stronger, of how everything, even tragedy, has a purpose, of how even scars can be turned into art. She told them, you are not your circumstances, you are your choices, and you can choose to rise. Her words traveled further than her feet could. Invitations came from schools, from cities, from hearts. She rolled onto stages, sitting tall, a queen on wheels with a crown of resilience. People wept at her story. They held her hands and thanked her. Because in her reflection, they saw themselves, their own buried pain, their own silenced hopes. Ayla taught them to see beyond pain, to turn tragedy into strength, to believe that even when life shatters, it gives you pieces to build something new. Years later, Ayla looked at her life, a gallery filled with her paintings, books written, talks given, lives touched, a life fuller than she'd ever dreamed. She realized if the accident hadn't happened, she would have lived small, afraid, unheard, but fate intervened not to destroy her, but to redirect her, to awaken her. She learned that the worst things often lead to the most beautiful rebirths, that closed doors are sometimes the kindest gifts, that brokenness reveals what truly matters. Now, when people asked her, if you could change the past, would you? She smiled, a smile filled with peace, and answered softly, no, not anymore. Because everything happens for a reason. Every pain, every loss, every ending. It carves you, shapes you, makes you the person you were meant to become. She sat by her window again, but this time not longing for the skies. Because she had learned the sky lives within us. She no longer needed to walk because she had learned to fly, on wings made of courage, of faith, and of the unbreakable human spirit. Ayla proved to the world that strength isn't the absence of pain, but the decision to rise despite it, to shine where others expected you to fall. There was a young woman named Ayla, born in a quiet town where mountains kissed the skies, where the rivers hummed songs of freedom, and the sun painted gold upon the earth. As a child, Ayla dreamed with wide eyes. She chased butterflies and spoke to the stars. She painted skies on broken walls and imagined worlds where anything was possible. Her heart was soft, yet fierce like a storm. But life, as it does, seldom follows our maps. It takes sharp turns and sometimes pulls the ground right from beneath our feet. Ayla grew, and like many, she was told that dreams are fragile, that women are weaker, that her voice should be soft, her steps should be careful, and her spirit should bow before tradition. At 21, Ayla's fate was signed, her marriage arranged, her future decided. She smiled for the pictures, while her heart broke silently, her colors dimmed, her laughter buried deep. Days turned into years of quiet survival, her soul a prisoner inside invisible chains. Her paintbrushes lay untouched in a dusty corner, her dreams folded away like old letters. But fate is peculiar. It visits unexpectedly. On a rainy evening, in a car bound for nowhere, life collided with destiny, metal twisted, glass shattered, and time froze. Ayla's world was forever altered in that moment. When she opened her eyes, she lay paralyzed, a body broken, a heart shattered, a life erased, rewritten in painful ink. Doctors spoke of fractures and impossibilities. "You'll never walk again," they said, as if those words alone could measure the weight of what she had lost. She mourned not only her legs, but the life she would never have, the places she would never reach, the dances she would never dance. Grief held her tightly, wrapping her in cold loneliness. Every day a reflection of loss, every night an echo of what was. For months, she refused the mirror. Afraid of the unfamiliar stranger it held, a woman with broken bones, sunken eyes, a shadow of the girl she once was. But healing often begins quietly. A song, a sunrise, a simple act of kindness. One day, a nurse sang an old song, and something deep within Ayla stirred. It was small, a spark, a memory. But even the smallest spark can set fire to darkness. She smiled, the first in many months, a trembling smile, yet powerful in its defiance. That night, beneath the hospital's pale lights, she made a silent vow. "I will not be defined by this. I will paint again. I will live again." Her hands weak, her fingers trembling, She held a brush once more. Colours danced where her feet could not, and each painting became a silent prayer. From sorrow, she created beauty. From despair, she wove hope. Her art told stories of survival, of skies she could no longer walk beneath, but could still imagine. Word spread of the girl who painted from a wheelchair, of colours born from pain, of canvases that spoke. People gathered to see the art, but stayed for the wisdom in her words. Slowly, Ayla found her voice again. She began to speak, first softly, then louder, to rooms filled with strangers, to hearts carrying invisible wounds. She shared her pain, not as tragedy, but as testimony of resilience. Life breaks us all in different ways, she'd say, but it also gives us the tools to rebuild. Her talks touched lives. People wept, people healed, people rose. They no longer saw a woman in a wheelchair, but a warrior, a leader, a light. Ayla's story was no longer just her own. It belonged to every person who had fallen, every soul weighed down by grief, every heart craving proof that life goes on. She became an icon of hope, not because she never broke, but because she chose to rise again and again, against the odds. Years passed, and Ayla's name travelled. Her paintings hung in galleries, her words engraved on hearts, her courage becoming a lighthouse for many. And yet, when asked, "Would you undo the accident if you could?" she smiled, not with regret, but with gratitude. "No," she'd reply, "because everything happens for a reason. I lost my legs, but I found my wings. I lost my old life, but I gained a new purpose." She taught the world that our circumstances do not define our worth, that scars are not signs of weakness, but evidence of battles survived. Ayla learned that strength is not the absence of pain, but the ability to move forward despite it. That happiness is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of meaning. She became the voice for the unheard, the strength for the weary, a mirror in which others saw their own power reflected back. And as the years painted silver into her hair, she looked out at the sunset, her heart full, her spirit unbroken, her journey complete in its imperfections. Her story whispered through time, "Your pain has purpose. Your struggle is not wasted. One day, it will be the reason someone else holds on." And so, Ayla's life stood as a testament to resilience, to courage rising from ruin, to the simple, undeniable truth: